Well, welcome to a topic on emotional intelligence. We have been working with the four intelligence systems and talking about how they aid us as a compass, directing us, guiding us, and aiding us every step of the way. Well, emotional intelligence is no different. I first want to separate the difference between your emotions and your feelings. You see, feelings are those perceptions of those sensations that we feel in the body. They're not necessarily related to an emotion. Sometimes we feel hungry or tired or cold, and there's no emotion involved. But these feelings, they're continuous readouts of our internal states, and no less important. But the real big key component here is that a feeling is merely one component of an emotion. There's so much more to the emotion than just the feeling. So let's get started. If you struggle at the end of this call or later in the week and you need one-on-one help, please don't hesitate to reach out for a one-on-one call with me. They are available for each and every one of you if and when you need them, however you deem that required in your life. This wheel of emotion is also another tool to take you deeper. And if you want to learn about it, I invite you to just search it on the web and do your own self-study. It's called the Wheel of Emotion. So without further ado, let us get really deep and started into our emotional intelligence and expanding our emotional awareness, first of all, to self-awareness and then self-management. And while emotional intelligence really picks up and takes in as well social awareness and those social skills that we can adopt and adapt and bring forth in our awareness to help manage that component as well. So what we'll really be talking about on this call today in depth is the self. We will go into some social skills in the breakouts after this short presentation, but we're talking about our self and our self-awareness to recognize. I believe that we all have the full capacity to monitor, manage, and master ourself and our results. But to do that, we have to be able to recognize and understand our mood, right? The state of being that we're in, our emotions, those drivers behind the scenes, and also the effect that we have on others. And in that awareness, we have to develop and practice what we call our ability to monitor, manage, and master, which is to control these disruptive impulses. And to really create space to pause and think before acting. So the first thing I want to share with you about emotions is how they have the capacity to start off small and we recognize them. And think of just an emotion, an emotional trigger that you get from someone you work with or someone in your family at a family function. And you notice when it starts, you notice where you feel it in your body, you notice the sign and signal it brings, and you notice its increase. And you notice when it gets pretty heavy, but you also notice its highest impact where you're almost acting out of the emotion and not yourself anymore. It's at the highest impact that we almost always shove it away, push it down, stifle it, diffuse it, hide it, and avoid dealing with it. And this is the truth in all of life, that it's generally right before we succeed that we bail. So I want to let you know that at that highest impact, we're going to talk about it when we break out, but this highest impact is the most intense. Let's just go there for a minute. This roller coaster, this up and down motion of emotions reminds us how important and valuable it is to look at the emotions at every level, from the peak to the low-lying levels, because down at the low-lying level is desperation, despair. It could even be guilt and worthlessness. And while the peak looks like the times we avoid it, we also avoid it at the low-lying levels. Each one is a peak of a high or a peak of a low. Emotions come with varying degrees, all for us to work through and not avoid. So just like a voltage meter measures the amperage of energy, I want you just for a moment to imagine you're driving your car down a highway, the speed limit's 60, and guess what? You choose to do 120. At 120, you're gripping the steering wheel with all your might, holding on to trying to control the car. All of your emotions are aroused. You can't have a conversation with someone in the car with you because your focus, your attention is all on driving this car at 120. There's a shimmer, there's a shake, not only in the car, but in you, right? You feel your body trembling. You feel yourself nearly out of control, right? But yet everything is heightened. This same out of control is what emotions feel like when they reach their peak, right? Viktor Frankl says it best when he says, between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. And in that space is your power to choose your response. In your response lies all your growth and all your freedom. Hold this quote in mind as we go through the rest of this presentation, because it's with awareness that you're able to create a bit of distance between you and your emotion, right? And it is your emotion. It isn't you, right? The emotion isn't you. Anything that changes in your reality, comes and goes, is not you. It is something you're experiencing. And an emotion is just energy in motion. So the simple step process that's marked out here in front of us is exactly what I shared with you in the chapter, walking you through the process of noticing the emotion, becoming fully aware of it, and your thoughts and feelings around it. But then stepping out, pausing, becoming the observer, to observe. And in that observer role, you naturally begin to create a little bit of distance between you and the thoughts and feelings. You create a bit of distance between you and the emotion. This is the space that Viktor Frankl speaks about in his quote. In this space, you're able to realign with all of you, to choose coming from your highest self, your best version of you, the one that's in alignment, in integrity with your core values, your beliefs, and your long-term goals for growth and development. So how would you want to show up in this environment? How do you want to show up in this moment? Because that option is available to you. And then as we move forward, we can start to create and establish behavioral habits that are in tune with what we want to create in life. So your results are a direct representation of what? What's the common denominator that gets in the way of your results? We talked about this last week. That's right. It's you. But what? What part of you? What about you is it that gets in the way? It's those small, tiny, little habits, the programming of past ways, behaviors, experiences, all stemming from those past experiences, and the conditioning that you picked up along the way. But guess what? There's really good news. The good news is here right now. And that good news is that you can change. You can change your conditioning, your programming, your habits, and the old ways of response. That's what that space that Viktor Frankl talks about is all about. That's what being the observer is all about. So we'll break out into some small groups, but I want you to remember that the results you seek are always looked at from all four intelligence systems. We started with the PQ at the far left. Last week, we talked about the IQ, the mental intelligence system at your axis, and how we relate to that as intellect and and think that we have to really come from that. And I'm telling you, this emotional intelligence is going to better serve you in all that you do moving forward. What thoughts, beliefs, and conditioning might be getting in the way of your results? This is a perfect question to ask yourself and journal on this week, to allow you to bring forth and sit with, make a date with yourself and look at some pain, some problems that are getting in the way of your results, because it's generally our emotional response to them, how we've stored them and shoved them away and discounted them. One last note before I wrap this up and we break out into groups is a topic on toxic positivity. There's such a thing as always shifting to what we call being happy. And researchers have found that the act of prioritizing positivity in everyday habits, as opposed to seeking happiness, can actually encourage a higher level of well-being, positive emotions, and a decreased risk of depression. I'm not here to tell you to change your vibration, raise your vibe, be happy, but I am here to tell you to start prioritizing the positivity. And I believe the exercise I just showed you is exactly that. It seeks to acknowledge the emotion, not discount it. It seeks to find the positivity, that just having awareness of the emotion is a step in the right direction, that prioritizing positivity is looking at everything and recognizing where you are at that moment. So EQ, this emotional intelligence, reminds us, right? It reminds you and me to practice. And what are we practicing? We're practicing coping with our strong emotions. We're learning to, one, acknowledge the emotion. This is the acknowledgement alone. If you stood here for months, you would be, acknowledging the positivity, because acknowledging the emotion and not dismissing it is positive reinforcement. It is noticing what's there. But two, after we acknowledge it, we do our best to confront it, but from an observer role, from being an observer. And in that role, we actually create just a bit of space between ourselves and the emotion. And the third thing we do is we own our response. We look at how we've responded in the past and why we've responded that way. And we craft a better way. We offer what we call self-care. And self-care is aligning with that best version of ourselves, how we want to show up. And it is crafting a response that's in alignment to our morals, our values, and the best version of us. There's greatness in you, and that greatness is striving and trying to come forth from you learning and practicing coping with your strong emotions. And it does become a practice, and it gets easier all the time. So next, we're going to walk through a process of the self-awareness and self-management. And then we'll walk into a practice of what it looks like to be socially aware and to really start to model some social skills that help us diffuse emotional upsets and conflicts. And then we'll take a minute for some Q&A. So if you jot down any questions along the way, that will be the time for you to open up to share them. And I'll take a moment to reflect on our inner work for this week's lesson. So let's get ready and break out to small groups right here and now.